Thelema, Coast to Coast, Show 32, August 27th, 2006. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Welcome to Thelema, Coast to Coast. My name is John Crow, and I'm the host of the show. Before getting into Show 32, I want to remind all the listeners that there are 4 ways to contact the show. First is via email, podcast@thelemacoasttocoast.com, through the website at www.thelemacoasttocoast.com, through voicemail at 206-600-4216, and by regular mail at Thelema, Coast to Coast, care of John Crow, P.O. Box 7045, Marietta, Georgia, 30065. Now, on today's show is a long show. It's a little over an hour. It has a lecture given by Keith 418 called Strategic Planning for Magicians, and this lecture was given at Theory on Babylon Oasis on June 3rd, 2006. However, before getting into that, I want to get into some listener feedback. The first is an email that was sent in July, so I'm very overdue in replying to this. Dear Thelema, Coast to Coast, first off, I want to say the show is fantastic. I found the podcast on MySpace through a banner linking to your MySpace page. The first show I listened to was show 26. After hearing the podcast, I was blown away and been very interested ever since. And like most new listeners, I've been going back and listening to the older shows as well. Keep up the great work. But the reason I'm emailing you is concerning a question about Thelema and practice. The question is, does nihilist views play a role at all in Thelema? Your thoughts and opinions would be greatly appreciated. Well, there are 2 ways you can kind of look at nihilism in this. In the more philosophical way of saying that there is nothing, that the universe is ultimately non-dual. And this is actually what I will be talking about in my lecture in the next podcast, show 33, a lecture that I gave at Dove and Serpent Oasis about the ontology of Thelema, based on Bereshith Crowley's essay about ontology. However, there is another aspect of nihilism where that means that things lack any inherent meaning. And Thelema can be accused of having that, since we don't posit any god or any transcendent deity that gives us meaning. We are open to criticism that we don't have any kind of larger universal meaning. However, Thelema counters that and says, no, actually, it isn't nihilistic, because the will, the supreme value and supreme meaning maker within the individual, gives an individual their point or their meaning. And therefore, it supersedes any kind of nihilistic tendency, because if you're in accordance with your true will, you actually have a universal meaning. It is manifesting in the macrocosm with yourself, but it also extends into the microcosmic universe, in that your will is in alignment with the universal will. However, you have to know your will, or you have to be working towards that. So certain things that you do can ultimately lead to nihilistic or have nihilistic tendencies, and those are ultimately not within your true will. However, the things that are within your true will are within the universal will and ultimately give you meaning within the microcosmic being that you are. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, for people who want to know before my lecture comes out what I'm talking about on the nihilistic or the nothing ultimate levels of being within the universe. There are 2 essays I recommend from Crowley. The first is Bear Sheath. It's in the second collected works. You can get that online. And then also within Magic Without Tears, there is a chapter called 0 equals 2, and Crowley talks about a lot of this. So if you want to read about nihilism and its place within Thelema, those are 2 great places to go read from Crowley. And again, that will be the kind of subject I have on the next podcast. So thanks for that email. The next one is from Bob in Cornwall. He says, 93 John. Just got to say, I bought Lon Milo Duquette's CD after hearing it on your show, and it's brilliant. The perfect antidote to the depression that can set in, while I imagine all that Keith 418's target setting and transparency will turn the OTO into something like Blair's Britain. Still loving the show. I never thought you would be able to keep up the high-quality output this long. 93's, Bob. Well, Bob, I'm glad you like the show, and I'm glad you like Lon Duquette's CD. I'm talking to Lon about having him on another future show, so I can talk to him about the CD and some of his newer books. I find it amusing that you think the ideas of transparency and target setting and things like that are depressing. I personally think that they're very meaningful and they really could move the OTO forward. Having goals does not mean that it's going to be boring and political like Blair's Britain or the Bush administration. We could have goals of manifesting the blue equinox. We could have goals of manifesting a Thelemic culture and Prophis houses and things like that. So it all just depends on how you approach it. And actually this leads into a lot of what the lecture about strategic planning for magicians is about. So, Bob, I hope you take a listen to the lecture given by Keith 418, and maybe you'll look at this a little differently. The last listener feedback is a voicemail. So here it is, and then I'll respond afterwards. This is a longer reply, which actually is something I like.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Greetings, John, in 93. This is Freighter Controversy from Buffalo, New York, USA. Today I wanted to contact you for 3 reasons. Number 1, Thelema Coast to Coast is a wonderful success, and I especially enjoy your discussions with Keith 418. These discussions are always intelligent, logical, and thought-provoking. It both amazes and saddens me that with only about 3,000 members worldwide, the OTO has no long-term goals. This is completely outrageous. I would think that at a minimum, there would be the goal of attracting new members and growing the membership. I have also enjoyed your lectures that you have broadcast and the interviews with the various luminaries from the Thelemic and occultic communities. I enjoyed your recent talk with Keith about Liber E, and I hope that you will cover other important Libers in the weeks and months to come. Thelema Coast to Coast is my favorite podcast, and I am always looking forward to the next one as it just keeps getting better and better. Number 2, I would like to recommend 2 topics for forthcoming shows. On the Thelema Coast to Coast message board, several of us have expressed an interest in when might be the proper time to introduce our children to Thelema. Additionally, is there an extant syllabus for the child student which might show the most appropriate things to teach at the corresponding appropriate age? Surely there must be a ceremonial magician out there who has already done this with his or her own child or children, and I would appreciate this being covered in a future show. Even though my own son is not yet 2 years old, he has already shown an intense interest in my magical jewelry, books from my magical library, ritual tools, and temple furniture. Additionally, I would also enjoy some information on Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page as a ceremonial magician and Thelemite. Your interview with Eric Davis about his book on the occult and magical aspects of Zeppelin 4 only served to whet my appetite for more information on this part of Jimmy's life. I don't know if this is even doable for a complete lack of data, but nonetheless, it would be fascinating to learn something about which I've wondered for all these years, since I first saw Do What Thou Wilt Shall Be the Whole of the Law scratched into the inner groove of my copy of the Led Zeppelin 3 vinyl LP way back in 1970. Finally, I would like to recommend a guest for your show, the phenomenal occult artist who calls himself Nemo. His artist website and internet store at nemosutopia.com is an occultic and psychedelic trip in time, space, color, and symbol. Inside his artwork, Nemo places occult symbolism and sigils, and his work must be seen to be believed. Nemo is a personal friend and a brother in the occult community, and I believe that your listeners would enjoy knowing about both him and his work. You can contact Nemo directly by going to nemo.org, and once you are there, click on the link Hire Nemo. Then, once that page loads, click on the link Email Nemo at the bottom of the page. His artwork is so unique that I think he would make an excellent guest for the show. These are my 3 comments for today. Please keep up the excellent work and know that we listeners really appreciate all the hard work that you've put into Thelema Coast to Coast, a wonderful fulfillment of your true magical will. Love is the law, love under will.
Thanks for taking the time and sending such a thoughtful reply. It's clear that you really thought about all the different things that you wanted to say and kind of organized it before you called, and that's wonderful. So the first thing I want to respond to is your 2 suggestions for topics. The first one was magical or thelemic parenting, when to introduce magic and magical ideas to children. This is an area that I am completely unqualified to discuss. I have no children, I'm divorced, and I actually have absolutely no interest in having children. So this is not an area that I really could speak authoritatively about. However, I'm sure there are lots and lots of people out there who have raised their children in a thelemic manner or a magic or pagan manner. So if listeners out there could give me some feedback on suggestions, maybe I can compile them all and in a future show kind of take a look at some of these things. And also if there's anybody out there who has some kind of background in not just child rearing, because there's lots of Thelemites out there who are raising children, which is wonderful, but somebody who also has more of an academic or professional background in child development, so that I could talk to that person about child development and introducing ideas about paganism or Thelema magic and so forth. So anybody who's got those kind of suggestions, please send them to me. The second suggestion for a guest was about Jimmy Page and Thelema and his interest in Thelema and magic and so forth. I have absolutely no access to Jimmy Page or anybody out there who does. Or Jimmy Page, if you're listening, I would love to have Jimmy on the show. If that is even remotely possible, that would be great. Or if anybody who is familiar with Jimmy can give some feedback or come on the show or something like that, email me and let me know you're out there, and we can see what we can do. Now, the suggestion of Nemo and the utopia and art and so forth, that sounds very interesting. Actually, I have been thinking about doing a show about art in the new eon, so Nemo might be a guest for that. I'm still kind of in the development phase for that, so that might be later this year, but I appreciate the suggestion. And I also appreciate the other comments that you gave, so thanks for taking the time and sending that in. Alright, that about does it for listener feedback today. I could be doing a bunch of other emails,